send you a check for all your marketing services. So thank you for that. So look, firstly about myself, born in Malaysia, family was from Malaysia, migrated when I was about 5 or 6 years old back in 1985. Coming over here as a young kid was very hard because there weren't many Asians around. So going to school, you were different. Speaking the language, you were different. You even sound different. I may sound Australian now, but we certainly sounded a lot differently back in the old days. So going from there, pretty much grew up here. My whole family grew up here. Went to university here at UWA, University of Western Australia. Did a law and commerce degree, and ran my father's family firm. So he started a firm over here where it's called, obviously, James Chong. He passed away in 2004, and I took over in 2004. I'm about 24, 25 years old. And we grew from about 4 to 5 people to about 20 that we have at the moment. So insofar as what we do, we specialize really in property commercial type work, from large, shopping centers, apartments, office towers to houses and subdivision land, things like that. Life in Australia is great. So that's a little bit about myself. Over to you, Leah.
Yeah, wow, that sounds, that's amazing. 24 and then grow the company from 4 to 20 people. Great job there. And I guess today's topic is really sort of like close to our heart, isn't it? Because we all migrant, and I'm from Malaysia as well, been here for 20 years. And I probably sounds like Aussie now, but I can speak like Malaysian too, if I need to. So, being migrant here, we have enjoyed the lifestyle here, and there is a reason why people want to come here. But anyway, just back to, I'm in the real estate industry, and quite often that when I deal with all the foreign investor who actually buy property in Australia, one of the most commonly questions that I get asked is, how can I migrate to Australia? And of course, there's so many pathways that people can apply or come here. Then personally, I came as a skill migration. But because today we don't have that much time, so we're not going to cover that part. Today we just mainly focus about business and investment migration. And so if people interested about skill migration, we will have another session in a few weeks' time, and we will keep you up to date. So yeah, so Jenny, tell me what sort of clientele, for example, like which country they're from, what sort of background they are that you mostly work with in the past or currently, like what type of clientele that you work with?
Well, basically, Leanne, we're very blessed. We have a wide spectrum of clients. So far as overseas clients is concerned, a lot of our work is from Southeast Asia and China. So Hong Kong, down to Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, things like that. So, we're quite, I suppose, very used to the service requirements or the differences in each culture. We treat the firm, I suppose, very, very family orientated. So we provide that sort of service that everybody's sort of used to, which is very different to what's over here. So that's our main clientele, is Southeast Asia, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good to hear. Especially if you have staff member that speak other languages, like as well. So it helps a lot with, helping these people migrating over.
Yep.
And Jennings, I know there are so many different types of business migration pathway. If you can just share with us, what is the most commonly sort of visa that you launch or you apply for so far? Well,
the most common gold standard, as in like the best visa that everybody wants to go for, normally is the sub-class 132 visa, which is the permanent resident visa direct route which I think is on your screen at the moment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But basically, that gives you a straight PR. Now, but before that, a lot of people may not be eligible for that because that's a high standard. The normal, I suppose, migrant inquiry comes from normal business owners, normal investors, and then they look at, I suppose, the 188A and 188B business innovation stream visa and the investor stream visa. We'll talk about the investor visa first, very quickly. Basically, it's for investors, people who have experience in investing overseas. So, for example, if they're in Malaysia or Hong Kong, for example, and they have been investing and they want to do the same coming over here, they can. And they just need to then, I suppose, make that level of investment over in Perth. There is a points requirement. There is a state nomination requirement. So you do need to get a state nomination approval for your investment. And then that leads you to an ability to then apply for a permanent residency in due course. You've got to put your money in a government bond here. So it's relatively safe because it's a government bond. It's about $1.5 million that you need to put in the government bond for about 4 years. And after 4 years, you can then apply for the standard 888 visa, which is the PR visa. So a lot of the investors want to look at that. And it's a relatively easy route to go to get a provisional visa and then turn it into a permanent resident visa. The only reason why people don't do that is because they don't want to lock up their money. From experience from talking to clients, they don't want to lock up their money in government bonds, which is a low interest rate. Might be better now, but or they don't have the necessary money, which is quite a lot still. Which is you need to have a business and personal assets of about 2.25 million, which is a fair bit, but available for transfer. So you need to actually transfer that across to Australia within 2 years. So that's the investor visa. But a lot of the queries do come from business owners, standard normal business owners who own businesses where they're from. So in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, what have you. And you then look at that sort of criteria. So in understanding and getting a PR visa in or any visa in Australia, I think you have to look at, just so that you have an understanding, you need to look at what you have now in the country that you have. And then from there, you see whether you're eligible to apply. And from there, when you get over here, if you are eligible and you get approval, then you then need to meet certain requirements when you're here for the following few years to then convert that to a permanent residency. So it doesn't matter what you're proposing to do at the moment and what you want to do in Australia. It's what you have in your relevant country, which is really quite important. So it's almost like a two-step process. In that respect, if you look at the business innovation visa, which is what I was talking about, if you have a business that you currently run and you have a turnover of Australian dollars, $500,000 for at least 2 of the last 4 years before you apply, and you own, let's say, 51% of the company, which normally most people do, and there are little different variations. If you earn 30% only, then you need a higher turnover in that business. But normally speaking, if you have 51% of a business, then all you need is a business turnover of 500 grand, and you should be able to apply. In all this, obviously, in all these visas, there's English requirements. If there's no English, a lot of people do suffer and can't get through on the English requirement because you have to have what we call functional English. And perhaps an IELTS test, which is not that easy. I actually taught IELTS courses before, just as a voluntary sort of scenario, and it's actually harder than you think. But if you can't do the English, you are entitled to pay a second visa charge. I checked it up what the charge was about a minute ago, and it was roughly about $4,000. So it's not that cheap, but at least there's an avenue there. There is an age limit of 55 years old, but again, there's always exceptions to every rule. You can apply for exemption if there's exceptional circumstances, some sort of exceptional benefit to Australia, and things like that. I'm I'm happy to go through a little bit more. You need to then have $800,000 available for transfer to Australia within 2 years. And then once you're over here, the WA government, because this needs WA state approval, requires you to have at least 900,000 net business and personal assets for transfer, to which 300,000 must go into a business. So when you come over here, you then propose a business, and then you need to sink in about $300,000. After 2 out of 4 years, you can then apply for the standard 888 visa, which will lead you to the permanent resident visa. So that's in a nutshell what a business owner visa is. And again, I'm happy to give you details offline later on. I think my details will come up later, and everyone can email me. But I know it's rather quick and hard to understand just by listening. But it's a relatively easy visa to get. But bear in mind one thing: with all visas, you need to prove all these figures. You need to have audited accounts and source documents. So that's where a lot of people stumble. Is the inability to prove the figures on an audited basis, or are unable to prove ownership of a business, which is quite common, particularly from China. Having said that, what I wanted to talk more about really was, I suppose, a 132 visa, which I think is on your screen. Now, 132 visa, like I said, is the gold standard. It is the best visa to get. And in fact, if anybody comes and asks me what visa are they entitled to, that's the first thing I look for. Why? Because that gives you a direct permanent resident. No one wants to sit around for 2 years and hoping that laws don't change and hoping that they can meet the requirements to then apply for PR. They'd rather get the PR upfront. And that's something that I would definitely recommend at the outset. The 132 visa is, it is certainly based on people who have successful careers, in the sense that you require, I suppose, a higher level of figures. Initially, there's no points test, so you don't have to worry about the age and all that stuff. In terms of points test related, you still need to be, I suppose, under 55 years old. Again, there's an exception to every rule, which is the exceptional economic benefit, which is submission to the state government allowing for some sort of exemption because you are proposing a significant business or project in Western Australia, for example. Bear in mind one thing: each state, and when I say state approval, Australia has various states. So yes, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, etc., etc. So each state does have slightly different requirements, but you still need to go to the relevant state that you want to enter, which in our instance, we're talking about WA. Again, you need a functional English requirement, which again, you can have a second visa charge. There are other requirements out there, which is character and health test, which is quite general. But let's look at the figures. The turnover that you require, which is the big one, is a $3 million. So you notice the difference between the business owner, which is a 500,000 turnover. Here we have $3 million. So significantly different, and hence why it's a lot harder to achieve. And this is Australian dollars we're talking about. So in terms of Malaysia, for example, we're talking about 9 million ringgit, roughly speaking. And you need this for at least 2 out of the last 4 years prior to your application. And you can have 2 businesses to collect that, I suppose, or aggregate that turnover. But in each of the business, you need to have 51% or 30%, in terms of the figures, if you can see on the screen there. Normally, people do have 51%, and that's why we just look at the turnover of $3 million aggregate. Your net assets in the business is roughly about $400,000 that you need to have, but the total net assets needs to be about $1.5 million. That is available for transfer, and then you have a 2-year requirement to liquidate and move money across. Again, you need WA state approval which is not a difficult process, but it's still a process that you have to go through. And that process really is ostensibly to propose a project. And in proposing a project, you will set out what you're going to be doing, the people you have consulted, how much money you're going to put into it, and more specifically, how many people you're going to employ, which is quite important. And the reason for that importance is because the WA state government requires, I suppose, a difference in how many people we employ depending on the type of proposed project that you're talking about. For example, if you look at the next slide, I think we have the next slide coming up. If you look at the, let's look at the non-property development business, any sort of business you're proposing, import, export, manufacturing, whatever business that you're proposing to do, assuming that you can meet firstly, like I said, what you have where you are, assuming you can meet your turnover requirement and your net asset requirements, your proposed business must be having a net value of net assets to be in the business for at least $1 million Australian. So you need to put in about $1 million physically transferred, not in time, but transferred into this new business by way of net assets. And what I was talking about earlier was about employment. In this instance, you need to create at least 2 new jobs, full-time equivalent for full-time Australian citizens or permanent residents. So I don't think we have clarity there, but you need to employ actual citizens or permanent residents of WA. And that is obviously to stimulate the economy. And on top of that, you need to own a residence, which is for yourself and your family to live in. And you need to actually do that. So in terms of investment, you're looking probably close to $1.5–2 million in terms of putting money in by the time you get a house and things like that. But where a lot of our queries come from, and I think that's where you guys see IQI sees quite a lot of queries, is the property development business or the property development side of things. One of the biggest and most common, we'll say popular, but most popular route for the 132 visa is to propose a property development project. Number one, because properties are seen to be relatively safe in Perth and improving, and there's a lot of optimism in that respect. And number two, the actual value of your investment is somewhat protected because it's in land. Like everybody knows, at the end of the day, at least you have the asset and land to hold in the event that something goes wrong. So a lot of people, and more so, particularly for overseas applicants, they look at property development business because it's not a dynamic, active sort of business that requires you to be working day to day, night and day. In that respect, they can rely on consultants, and people like that, and they don't have to actively daily be involved in the business per se. And that's very attractive to a lot of migrants. So if you look at the requirements, what WA requirements are, they need to have a net assets in the business in WA for about $2.5 million. Now that's, if you look at it on the left, it's significantly different to one. And so there's a big difference there, but they have made this distinction between 2.5. The creation of at least one new job, and when they say full-time equivalent, it means you can have 2 part-times, and that makes 1 full-time. But in their case, it's only 1. And you can own, and obviously you need to buy your own residence. And that's where we've worked a lot, significantly with IQI, with Leanne, Lily, and Lina and the team, to locate a lot of properties. Number one, first for project developments, so develop the properties. Number 2, to then on-sell the properties. And number 3, to source the actual residents for them to live in. So it's been wonderful working with IQI and on that basis to be able to find a lot of, I suppose, good projects to deal with. Quite familiar with the process. They're quite familiar with the sales and market in that respect. And on our basis, we're not just migration agents. Our bread and butter is property commercial work. So in that respect, it's quite a good synergy for us. A lot of people find that this property development business proposal or pathway the most attractive because at the end of the day, to get there, they are able to easily, I suppose, fulfill that one full-time equivalent job requirement. You understand the minimum wage here is roughly about 40,000 Australian. So you'll be spending about 40,000 Australian irrespective. And so it's relatively easy to attain that because you can do joint ventures with current property developers. If you're a little bit unsure yourself, you can I suppose invest significantly in local property developers and local property development projects here, and certainly IQI can facilitate that introductions in that respect, and we'll obviously make sure that the investments are protected with all the securities and things like that. Just an interesting note. Each like I said before, each state in Australia has different requirements, not all specifically about property development, but they do have different requirements, even if it is about property development. I'll give you an example. Queensland, for example, on top of all the investments, requires you to have the relevant business background. So you must be a property developer back in wherever you're from. A little bit different. In Victoria, similar thing, you need to have relevant qualifications, such as being an architect or an engineer or something like that. So it's a little bit different. So WA is the most, I suppose, straightforward, vanilla, clean sort of scenario whereby you just identify that you want to develop a property. You're proposing that you will source land via someone like IQI, and that you will be putting and committing $2.5 million to it, and you just have to commit to employing a full-time employee, and they will give you they should give you an approval in that respect. From my experience, there hasn't been an issue in obtaining that. So let's look at the next slide. As I said, the state application process is quite a easy process in the sense that it's very straightforward. WA and particularly has a very, I suppose, in terms of government and official documentations, is very straightforward, and everything's online, and there's a lot of transparency. If they can't just simply say no, because the laws are very robust here. And you can appeal, and it's a very, I suppose, a very good process in terms of feeling secure that if you meet the requirements, you should be approved. You have to pay the nominated fee. You apply to the state government, what we call Business Migration Centre, for the approval first. Once they meet you, they may interview you on the phone. They used to do face-to-face, but I think because of COVID or ease, sometimes they do interview you on the phone. And after that, then you lodge to your expression of interest, which is basically you are expressing your interest to the WA government that you wish to apply, and from there you make the application. So it's a relatively straightforward process in that respect. Next slide. Again, once you enter in Australia, you are required to attend a meeting with the officer to then, talk about your proposed business. It's not a scary process. It's very informal. The people are relatively nice, and they're not out there, despite what people think, they're not out there to trick you. They're out there to actually just ascertain and clarify what your business was. I'll give you an example. One of the submissions that we did about a year ago, one of my clients suggested that they were going to employ 10 people. And the officer said, are you sure that's what you want to do? Because you're not required to. And we obviously quickly amended that to the relevant 2 people. Which was perfectly acceptable. So they're not there to get you. They're very helpful, and it's a very welcoming sort of process. There is ongoing surveys, what we call monitoring surveys. This is very important. After 24 months being in Australia doing your project, they will send you a form and they will ask you to fill that in, which is compulsory. And it basically monitors what you have been doing for the last 24 months, which is effectively whether you have carried out the proposal that you said you would. Now, there are exceptions. If you haven't carried out the proposal or you haven't done a lot of what you said you were going to do, you simply need to explain it. Sometimes there are genuine explanations. The economy did really badly, or at the moment, for example, COVID-19. There are genuine reasons, and then again, they're not out to get you. As long as you can justify those reasons, they're more than happy to, I suppose, grant you the necessary leeway and discretion. But it is important that you must fill in the 24 months, failing which they have every right to terminate your provisional visa at that point in time. And again, and that's what we talked about in step 6. So let's look at the next, and that's me. Contact us, Denny Chong. That's my email there. Anybody who wants to ask any questions specifically, happy to fill those emails. But insofar as that is concerned,
yeah, please take a screenshot. Yeah, if you need to contact Dennings. And thanks for that sharing, Dennings. It's quite a process, isn't it? So
it is quite a process. You're right. It is quite a process. But every process just has steps, and like I said, in Australia, it's very transparent.
Yeah.
You just do a tick box, and I think the market at the moment suggests that, and what I'm seeing through at the moment, suggests that there are a lot of scope for the 132 visas, and specifically property development and property sort of transaction based. A lot of developers here are looking for investors. They do fulfill already the employment requirements, and joint ventures can be done with property developers for you to be management, joint management control. It's a model that works. It's a model that's been successful, and WA loves it. WA loves it. Yeah.
That's very encouraging to hear, and thanks for your little promotion just then. Yes, at IQI, we do have experience working in collaboration between, like Jennings, the migration agent, a developer, and us as a property, agent to, arrange the development and sell as well for the investor. So before we go on, just wondering if anyone have any question, and feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type it in. And I saw that in the group chat that we have, Chanta from Cambodia is really looking forward to work with you. So we will definitely link you guys up. Any question, anyone for now? Chanta, if you have any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, since Dan is here and he's not charging yet. Yeah.
Thank you. I will read through, and then if I have question, I will ask him. Okay, we contact to him. Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Chanta. Yeah. And also, since it's quite a process, usually how long would it take, from someone decided to apply and planning to apply actually? Sounds like there's quite a bit of planning work to do before.
There is a bit of planning work because it's a life-changing move. But assuming that you've made a decision and you're ready to go, and assuming that you've got all the documentations in the world that I've asked for, and I filed the application, let's say today, generally speaking, you're looking at about a 4 to 6 months process before an approval.
Okay.
And that's the average time. Sometimes a little bit quicker, sometimes a little bit later, but it's been about 4 to 6 months.
Oh, that's pretty efficient for WA, 4 to 6 months. I noticed that there's a question here from Curtis. So just wanted to clarify, the 2.5 million is required in the development project in WA to fulfill the visa requirement?
Yes. Net assets, yeah? Net assets.
Net assets, yeah. So we answer your question, Curtis? Anyone else have any question?
Yes, could I ask a question? It's John Carstens here, to Dennings, the migration agent.
Yes.
Just on the $2.5 million, is that, when you say net assets, is that the total build, or is it land and buildings of the project? So
It's a total build.
Total build of new construction, including land or excluding land?
Normally, you would exclude land on the calculation basis, but it's on the build itself.
Okay, so if it's a project of $2.5 million on the build, it's probably going to be doing a project of, say, $4.5 million, because there must be land included in that as well.
Roughly speaking, probably about 3+.
Yes.
3.5. Yeah.
Okay, and so that you could then, as a private investor,
but I think right. Sorry, just yeah.
Carry on.
You mean the private funds, right? So just like bank lending, do you like referring to mortgage or?
No, he's referring to the value of the land. Do you count the value of the land, the acquisition of the land, as part of the net asset investment? Is that right, John?
Yes, so if I came along by myself from South Africa and I wanted to come and live here with my family, I would, and I wanted to just do a development myself, not inside a partnership with several other parties, and it was through, say, a real estate company such as the one we're talking about. And so if I wanted to own that myself, I would be looking to invest $2.5 million in the building, but I'd also have to buy the land. I think that's the point.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And if I only had $2.5 million, then basically I would have to participate with a group of investors where they've bought the land and I'm putting in $2.5 million, which is going into the build.
That's exactly right. And that's where a lot of people do. And that's what I was inferring, that at the end of the day, IQI has been able to facilitate, or myself has been able to facilitate with IQI, a lot of joint ventures or investment syndications into those public development type stuff, so that you don't have that extra carrying costs for the land component.
Perfect. And is there just a question of, does it have to be one of these managed funds that they refer to? No, it's just an investment, an Australian company.
Yeah, you don't. Okay, sorry. To clarify, the investment does not have to be in a managed fund. However, a lot of the investments are because they are obtaining investors from, let's say I was a developer in Australia and you wanted to invest, and I had multiple investors. It may very well be a managed fund. But for your purposes, if you are the immigrant, it doesn't have to be in a managed fund.
Okay.
All right.
That's very interesting.
All right. Mind you, one of the most important things that you need to understand is that when you do the 132 visa, you need to have some sort of control or senior role in the business. And that's where, I suppose, it's very important that I suppose you deal with the people that you know, like Lily or myself, where you can facilitate that as part of the joint venture, where you join the board for the management control rather than a passive investor. This visa is not for passive investment. All right, so you must be on the board to have some sort of say or control on a senior day-to-day level.
As you would want to if you're going to invest that sort of money. So that's a good thing.
100%. Yeah.
And sorry, there was something about your family must come and live here as well. That was one of your bullet points. Number 3, own a residence and your family will live in WA. So you buy that on top of the $2.5 million investment.
Yes. You buy a residence and you live here. Because they have to come over here. At the end of the day, as part of the requirements when you're granted, they must make an initial entry. At the end of the day, whether they stay here or not is a different requirement. There are residence requirements. Once you are a 132 visa holder, you are a permanent resident, ostensibly forever. Except that if you don't, what you can do is stay here forever. What you can't do is leave Australia and not have a valid return resident visa coming home. So that's where everybody talks about the 2 out of 5 years. If you stay 2 out of 5 years here, you've got an automatic renewal for another 5 years. Just a technical point, you're not renewing your PR. You're renewing your resident return visa. So you can theoretically stay here for the rest of eternity. It's just that you can't leave and come back.
Okay. I understand. Super. That's very helpful.
Denise, with regards to families, right? Is that the age restrictions for the kids that can join under the family visa?
Not at all. The kids. Sorry. There is, insofar as the family is concerned, each family must the children must be deemed a dependent. So theoretically, the presumption that the law makes here is anybody under 18 will be a dependent of the parents, and as such will form the family unit. If they are above 18, they can still be dependent like most kids who go to school and university. And what you need to do is effectively show the enrollment. Once you hit 23, 24, 25, if they're still in university, you probably can still, we've got one through at 25, but once they finish university, it's going to be pretty hard to say that they are dependent. So, you know, there's a bit of leeway, but it's common sense prevails.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just quickly introduce Lily Chong is the director of IQI WA, and Lily actually has quite an extensive experience when it comes to doing property development in the migration pathway. She has done few projects in the past with investor from overseas. And I have noticed that there's a few more questions here. So how hard is the source of fund? I mean, I think Achanta means like, how do they source the fund? The source of fund, do they look into it very?
Yeah, they do.
Thoroughly?
Source of funds is a very, very important component of all visas. Number one, the funds must be made, and they look back a few years, typically 2 years. And it must be legitimately earned, and it must be earned via the relevant businesses that you're talking about. Otherwise, it won't be treated as part of the application. So source of funds, they will look into it, and something that you need to submit, and you will need to have documentations to show it. Typically speaking, if you have audited accounts, which they do require, China's a bit different. China needs the special purpose reports, but that's because they deem it as a high-risk country per se. But you need audited accounts, and typically if the audited accounts shows net profit, and it's relatively easy to show the source of funds. It's when the company can't show you the profit, they'll ask you where you got your money from, and that's where the issue is going to lie, and you're going to have to justify where that money comes from.
Yeah, understand. Yeah. And I think the next question is about more on your service fee. I suppose this is depends on the individual, or do you have a fee?
Well, yeah, look, service fee is very hard to say. I mean, it's on a case-by-case basis per se.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so I'm happy to field others, I suppose, queries after having a preliminary look at the application and what they want to do and what they're trying to do. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all looking at business and investor visas. There's a mountain load of visas that you can apply for. It's a question of picking the easiest and the most appropriate one. So at that point in time, I would be able to then give you an estimate of fees.
Yeah. So I think the best way probably will be get in touch with you, and because everyone's situation is a bit different, isn't it? So then you can assess best on that. Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
And we have another question.
I actually have another questions here because I get most of them. Most of the times, people will ask me, right? Let's say if I buy a property from you, do I get the PR for Australia?
That's a very thank you, Lily. That's a very, very common question, particularly from Southeast Asia, Malaysia particularly, where they say that if we buy a property, can we just get our PR instantly? But the answer is no. There are multiple factors involved. Like I say, in the 132 visa, for example, you need to put a certain level of money in. There are other criteria such as health factor, good character, English requirements. So the answer in buying a property, will that get you automatically a visa? The answer is no. In buying a property, will that assist you in getting a visa? The answer is yes, but you need to buy the right one. Insofar as let's say for a 132 visa, you buy a development project. You need to buy, and you got to remember you have, I suppose, residence requirements as well. So you need to buy the right house to live in as well. So of its own, no, but it will assist if you do it correctly.
Yeah, thank you. I think the next one that I always being asked, I mean, most of the times, that if I send my kid to study in Australia, and let's say they eventually get the PR, does the parents also get the PR?
If the kids come here
and study and get the PR,
yep,
well, the parents automatically get the PR as well.
Okay, so if the kids come here and study, and presumably they'll get a skills visa as a result of their degree or what have you over here, under the independent skills program, the parents do not necessarily automatically get, well, they don't get an automatic visa. That's for sure. There are other visas that they can consider, and we're talking offline, off topic for a moment. There's contributory parent visas, there's sponsored parent, balance of family tests, things like that, that parents can come in via. But just a quick note on that, there is a long queues for that sort of visas. And we're talking about many, many years. We're talking about 10, 20 plus years. So it's not like you can just apply. The kids come here. It's not a scenario where overseas families send the kids here to get the easy route, to get and study here, get the PR instantly, and then sponsor parents across. That is not a viable route, to be clear on that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The rest,
I think we have one question here. Is there a minimum cost for the personal resident for the visa?
No, there isn't. There isn't a minimum cost per se, but there is a minimum requirements in individual visas for money to be transferred across and invested. So if you talk about net asset and net business visas, for example, if I look at the 188 business innovation, you need to bring in and it's WA government requires you to put in at least 900,000 available for transfers, to which 300,000 must be in net assets in business. That leaves 500,000 that you need to bring in. All right. Now, ostensibly, your house is going to cost you roughly that. So there's no minimum per se, but there is, I suppose, a de facto minimum at the end of the day.
Sounds great. I think we have more questions coming. So the money being transferred across to Australia can be put straight into the resident. I think you probably have answered that question. Yeah. And do we have any other questions? Anyone? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Now's your golden opportunity. Danny is not charging. Right, we have one question here. If a single father, more than 50 years old, plus 2 dependent kids, what is the best way to migrate?
Married.
That might actually cost you more. That might actually cost you more. Look. At the end of the day, I come back. Everybody asks. They give their criteria. They give a very standard general question like that. The question you ask yourself is, number one, what are you doing now? Are you working for someone? You have your own business, and from there, or you're an investor. And from there, like I said, you look at what you have now. Are you eligible to apply? And if so, what route? So if you have a business, then you look at the business innovation stream. If you don't have a business and you work for someone, then you need to look at other streams. And you have been an investor, for example, you do the investor stream. If it's none of that, there are other avenues to pursue, like skills visa, senior executive routes, or things like that. So it really does depend on where you are at. Because you're 50 years old, most of the requirements for age are 55, so you're going to be okay. But again, it's very hard to answer without knowing your route. But the general concept is look at what you have and what you are doing now first.
So basically, there's so many options, and it's come down to which one will be easier or faster and cheaper, I suppose. Yeah. Next question I have: transferring of money from overseas into Australia, would it be taxable?
Will it be taxable?
The fund that's come through from overseas.
Look, I'll preface this. sorry, I'll preface this by saying that you need to ask your accountant that answer. But
and also, is that the funds for the investment to fulfill the visa requirements? I mean, what is the fund that referring here?
It's for the migration purposes. So it's for the projects, for example.
Yeah, initially the answers, in my understanding, is that it's not necessary. The mere transfer doesn't trigger a taxable event. So you're not going to be taxed coming over here. You'll be taxed with your bank fees. You'll be, obviously there's bank fees, but the Australian tax, well, it won't even apply to you because you won't be a tax resident at that point in any event when you first transfer across. What is important for everyone to realize, and I'm a little bit adding into the tax zone, so consult your accountant, is this: once you're here, however, and you're here for 183 days in a year, which you will be if you're a permanent resident, you will be considered a tax resident of Australia, to which the Australian worldwide tax applies, and that's where we'll help you deal with that sort of issues.
So yes, I hope we answer your question, Ben. Any more question, anyone? Well, sounds like we all pretty good. Lily, do you have any other question that you would like to ask, or any project that is suitable that you would like to present now? Take the opportunity now, just joking.
Maybe we can promote a little bit with the events that we are going to have tomorrow. I mean, I'm not quite sure if that's any, audience or participants, right, that actually from Hong Kong. Tomorrow we will have another sections. Leanne, maybe you can mention some about the 3 o'clock sections that we're going to have.
So tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we will have a GY Live on Facebook, basically talking about, 2 of our projects, a very outstanding project. One is the Crest Apartment, which is where our office is at. Very outstanding development, as well as another one by Far East Consortium in Perth Hub. Because with all the new grant and incentive that government is giving now, there's no better time to invest in Western Australia now. There's lots of stamp duty discount and developer incentive as well. So we are going to go live tomorrow at 3 o'clock on Facebook, GY Facebook. If you're interested to find out more, you can leave a message or your email here as well. We can send you our link or to find out where is the live. And Derek, our business development manager, is going to present live on the 2 projects and show you why Perth and why Western Australia. So that's going to be very exciting. And also next Friday, we're going to have another prop talk on investing in Philippines. So if anyone interested in looking to expand your portfolio and have a great return from your investment, that is a good one to join us as well. That's next Friday. Yeah. And I think that is it for tonight. I haven't got any more questions coming through. So last chance, anyone? Any more questions that anyone want to bring up? So sounds like then you covered it very well. Everyone has full understanding on how to migrate here. Like what we said.
Just want to say thank you to yourself, Leanne. Thank you, Lily, Derek, and Nina, and the team at IQI. Thank you for letting me come on board and give a little talk to your guys. Hopefully it helps. Like I said, any queries, more than happy to field emails. You can email Leanne. You can email myself or what have you. Happy to just return an email if I can.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. You actually
thank you so much.
Give extra that experience and knowledge to our investor, because that's what people want to do and come to migrate to Australia. And thank you, John, for your kind words as well and all those questions. And if anyone would like to have a chat further with Dennings, you've got his contact detail. If not, let us know and leave a message and we will get in touch with you. And once again, thank you, Dennings, to join us this evening and share your experience with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And Chanta, I will definitely send you the contact. I mean, you got the contact now. Yes, definitely can talk more about collaborating,
from
migration.
Cambodia.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.